weirdos, randos, and all manner of scum and villainy. I'm Jesse B. Gill. Thank you for joining us. Joining me today are our senior editor from IGN, Joshua Yehl.
What's going on?
Greetings, General Kenobi, and my friend and Star Wars fan who you may know from the internet, Emma Fyffe. Emma, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, and a good McClunky to you all.
Awesome, perfect segue. Today we're going to be talking pretty freely about the Star Wars galaxy, where it's all headed, and so we want you to know there's some spoilers that are going to be thrown about pretty freely. Now's your warning. If you don't want that kind of thing, now's the time to hitch a ride on the back of a TIE fighter and cruise on out of here. Right now, The Rise of Skywalker is still in theaters. It's going to be the last time for a little while that we'll have a Star Wars movie in theaters. What happens next now? Where does Star Wars go from here now that the Skywalker Saga is concluded, so to speak?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, and I understand the perspective on it completely of people being like, well, what now? Because so much of the Star Wars films have been focused on the Skywalker Saga. I mean, literally all of them, with like the exception of Rogue One and Solo, and even those had slight sprinklings.
A dusting of Skywalker.
A dusting of Skywalker. But I think as somebody who is very tapped into the Star Wars fandom, like, to me, there's already so much that isn't Skywalker that I go, well, yeah, it's a big galaxy and there's a lot of time periods we haven't explored. Darth Vader is present in, and Ahsoka Tano is present in, who was his apprentice in the Clone Wars, but by and large, Star Wars Rebels really isn't about the Skywalkers at all. It's about this new core group of characters who are just people that are involved at the sort of beginning of the rebellion.
I'd buy into that. Joshua, what do you think? Where does Star Wars go after Rise of Skywalker?
Well, I think it's good that they're deciding to take a little break, like pump the brakes and decide what they're going to do next. I don't know what the future of Star Wars will look like for sure, but I do know that they're going to take a lot of lessons from the sequel trilogy and apply that, and that'll almost be like how they promote whatever these new movies are. Because as we know from the prequels, people didn't like for example, heavy CGI. So for this new sequel trilogy, they're like, we built everything we possibly could. We're using tons of puppets again. So I feel like, again, going into whatever these new movies are, things people that did not like about the sequel trilogy were like, they didn't plan it out. So they're like, we have a plan for all three of these movies. Yeah. We know the answers to the big questions. Just wait. So I feel like that's sort of the way these new movies are going to be rolled out and fed to the audience.
A little more architecture and a little less gardening, if you will.
Absolutely. And we're certainly kind of trained at this point to think of Star Wars being led by the movies. It's movies first, but these days it's more than just movies, right? Mm-hmm. We have all this cool stuff going on with Disney Plus. We just finished the first season of The Mandalorian, which has been my favorite Star Wars thing of the year. But it's just the beginning. There's so much coming down the pipe. So it's not just Star Wars movies, but definitely all the other stuff that they have rolling out. So let's get kind of specific. I wanted to kind of look at three different periods and kind of talk about the likelihood that this could be where Star Wars is heading next. And first, I have to say, where I personally think everything has to go, at least in terms of films, is the Old Republic. Tell me I'm wrong. Fight me.
I'm not going to fight you unless you were to tell me, because I think that given the success of The Mandalorian and the fact that they're not beholden to make quite as much money, honestly. So I think that they're making some stronger, more fun, interesting choices in The Mandalorian that they wouldn't necessarily make on the big screen. That being said, I think that with a lot of architecture, a lot of planning, you could get a really great Old Republic era film series, because there's so much to draw from there. And as far as Star Wars canon goes, we don't actually know very much about that time period. Certainly it's something that's been explored in some expanded universe type
games,
materials,
obviously.
and certainly in the video games. Now, the video games, I would say, are canon adjacent.
Sure.
They're not entirely not canon.
But they're so ancient, they happen so far in the past that they might as well be mythic, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But I would personally love to see that time period. I think that there's really fun stuff to explore there. And I also think that given what we've seen in The Mandalorian, particularly referencing the fact that there was this big conflict between Mandalorians and Jedi. I mean, that's something that kind of ties into all the Old Republic stuff, so it makes a lot of sense to me.
Right? Did you just like possibly suggest the Great Mandalorian War?
I mean, listen, there was a movie fight several years ago that was all Star Wars, and that is what I suggested a Star Wars film should be about, so I stand
That's my
by
new
it.
pick. That's my new pick. But Joshua, what do you think? Star Wars past, do you think that's a rich area for the franchise to kind of look for new stories next?
Yes, I think it's a great idea to go into the past because Anakin hasn't been born yet. The Skywalker Saga has not begun. When we say the Old Republic, we're talking thousands of years beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, everyone loves the Knights of the Old Republic, original video game. Sequels, debatable.
I
like
them
them.
Pretty good.
I like them.
I
but
stand both. I stand both.
yeah, some people, are. That's not what we're talking about here.
Fair
but
enough.
anyways, I do think. However, there is a danger of going back there because people do hold the Knights of the Old Republic in such high esteem
Yes.
that they're going to essentially want a beat-for-beat rehash of that story, and they want to see, like, the Revan twist on the big screen. By the way, Revan is now canon, according to the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary.
I've been obsessed with The Witcher, which is such a good adaptation of the
Toss a coin.
novels, and yeah, it's great. So to me, I look at that and I go, oh man, I would love a Knights of the Old Republic series that is truly just an adaptation of the material. But of course, I totally agree with your point, Josh, that if you are getting into adapting known material, there's always a certain level of expectation, which is, I think, what even the sequel trilogy of Star Wars was coming up against. People were expecting it to go one way, and because those expectations were not met exactly, people started going, this is terrible. And it's like, is it terrible or is it just not what you wanted?
Exactly. That is a huge problem of fan expectations.
Yeah.
And how do you please those? Knights of the Old Republic is considered by many to be the greatest Star Wars game ever told. And a big part of that is because of the story. So if you don't do that justice, you're going to get people with their pitchforks out
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, Star Wars fans get real mad about stuff
But
like
then,
that.
but then
They're
again,
very
it's
passionate.
like on the flip side, it does have such a great story, and what a fantastic adaptation that could potentially be in the hands of the right creative team.
Agreed. If you've looked at any of those cool animatics that the recent
Yeah.
game have put out of all these cool grand Jedi Sith battles and stuff, yeah, I want to see a real life version of that.
No.
However, the question is that better served as a film series, a trilogy, if you will, or even a trilogy of trilogies, because Star Wars likes doing that kind of stuff, or is it better as a series? Is it a Game of Thrones for Disney Plus?
Yeah, I think it's a Game of Thrones for Disney Plus. That's my personal vote. But yeah.
I was actually going to answer saying I want a trilogy, but the second you said that, I was like, oh, that is really good because it's a time where there were not just a handful of Jedi and Sith.
Yeah.
There were like
Everywhere.
tons of Jedi and
that's-
Sith, armies of Jedi and Sith, all with like lightsabers.
Yes.
Pre Darth Bane. Yeah.
And you could have like different like houses of like Jedi and like
Totally.
Sith and like maybe like some gray Jedi in the middle. I really like that
in court
idea.
intrigue and
yeah.
politics
And
and
you can
stuff.
even just have stories about the other people that were alive during that time period and how that affected their lives and what was going on politically. You have such great material there to even create something that's more like an anthology series, like the Clone Wars.
Sure.
The animated series The Clone Wars, for example, is an anthology series. These 2 episodes are one story, the next 2 episodes are another story, the next episode's a standalone, and you don't have to watch them all in order.
The middle of the season for The Mandalorian kind of felt that
Yeah,
way. Until it
absolutely.
all kind of came back together at
Yeah.
the end. But like it felt like, okay, cool mission. Don't see how they're all connected until the end.
Yes, exactly.
I like that style too. So we're talking about the past. Obviously, lots of rich stuff to get into there. But what about the future? Isn't that kind of crazy to think like, what if we went even further past the sequels? What does the Star Wars galaxy look like?
Yeah.
We know the Jedi survive. The Sith don't, but if the Jedi survive, darkness has to rise
Has
to meet
to.
it. Doesn't this just all start over again?
Yeah.
What does the future look like for Star Wars? Like in the future?
Well, I guess look at me. So I think, are we talking about like maybe like a sequel trilogy that like picks back up with
Or
like
for
Rey,
it-
Finn,
just-
and
just-
Poe?
or just
Or
to
do
kinda
you want to go
suggest-
like so far beyond that all the characters we currently know are dead?
Possibly, like as just to have something to compare it to, like the Dark Horse Legacy series, where we follow the adventures of Cade Skywalker, who I think was Luke's like grandson.
Sure, yes,
something
I think
a
you're
couple
right.
generations down the line. What does the galaxy look like now? Obviously, a lot of the expanded universe Legends material kind of covers that New Jedi Order legacy. Obviously, do we start over again and start forging our way forward in time?
I definitely wouldn't mind seeing something that is totally fresh in the future, independent of anything that's happened in the past. I mean, certainly the past is going to inform what's going on in the future, but I think that one of the things that Rian Johnson did incredibly well in The Last Jedi was making the universe or the galaxy feel really big again, basically saying, hey, it's not just this one family that's important and are the driving force behind everything that happens. Anybody can be important. And we see that illustrated so beautifully in the end of the film when you've got the little kid who's sweeping the farther stable.
I am that kid.
Yeah, the broom kid.
Still.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying is that he was very much suggesting that it's not like the legacy of the Jedi are going to live on and they are still out there and the Force will create new Jedi. And so I would love to see a future that is almost more of what I think grumpy old man Luke wanted, which was like, let's be somewhere in the middle, because otherwise you will always get into the conflict between the Jedi and the Sith. Because as you say,
will never end.
If it's just Jedi, then the Sith will rise.
If
to
it's
meet
not
them.
the Sith, it will be something else.
Yes, exactly. So you gotta achieve the Bendu, the middle.
Is this galactic peace forever at the end of Rise of Skywalker? Kind of don't think so. What about you, Joshua?
Surely not.
Of course
But no,
not.
if I were to sort of just cobble together a story idea, I think there would be great power in 10, 15 years from now to have the sequel trilogy cast, like those three characters, like Rey, Finn, and Poe, come back. Very much in the same way as Days of Future Past did for X-Men. So this would not be a time travel story, mind you, but I think it would be interesting to pick back up with those characters and look at the galaxy. What does this galaxy look like, 10, 15 years removed from the Skywalker Saga? And I think what you can do that's really interesting is that you could have Rey have started a new Jedi school full of Force sensitives. Finn, as we know, is Force sensitive too. Maybe he's there helping and everything. Poe's giving them some spice on the side or something. I don't know.
He's running spice. He's a spice runner.
I think what the most interesting part is that they will have brought up a whole new era, new class of Jedi, literally a class. Stay with me here. We could have a Star Wars Jedi Academy, if you will,
like
a Hogwarts for Star Wars.
Exactly
and then we were talking about houses of different Force users. We could have different houses in this school, and they could divide up people into how they approach the Force. There's people who see the light, the dark, something in between, but maybe they don't call it dark anymore because Rey was trained on Ahch-To, which is a place where light and dark were in balance, right? It's a very unique and special thing that not really any other Jedi that we know of has been brought up on. So I think that would be a great place for her to pass on that philosophy, and then we get sort of a young adult thing of these teens with lightsabers and stuff trying to be Jedi and not become Sith.
It has been reported that all of the stars of this trilogy aren't going to be coming back. Daisy Ridley as Rey, John Boyega as Finn, Oscar Isaac as Poe, and down the line, I find that really hard to believe. Am I crazy, or do you think that we'll at least see those characters in some way in the future?
It's interesting because I feel like when the original Star Wars trilogy ended, it was very much the same thing of
this is the end.
This is it.
Yeah.
Not coming back. Now, obviously, we're in a different climate as far as Star Wars goes now because back in 1983, that was all the Star Wars there was. So that made perfect sense. But now we live in an era where we know there's always going to be more Star Wars.
Nothing ever ends.
So it is interesting to hear them all say that they're not going to come back. I wonder if a few years removed, they may change their minds. But I think that the situation that anybody that's attached to such a large franchise where you're playing these characters that are instantly action figures is you don't necessarily want as an actor to become specifically tied to that.
Forever.
So, yes.
I mean, even Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans eventually want to stop being Iron Man and Captain America. Eventually.
Did you see Knives Out? Chris Evans was having a great time.
Cool. What do you think, Joshua?
So I think Star Wars fandom does this funny thing where when Return of the Jedi ended, a lot of people were like, Ewoks, I don't like this. But now the original trilogy is held up as iconic and untouchable. When the prequels came out, a lot of people weren't so hot on those. And now, you'll notice, especially when the sequel trilogy came out, all these sort of prequel apologists came out, and I'm the prequels aren't so bad.
Prequelists, we call them.
I think just saying that, people started typing angrily on the comments at me. But I will say I love a lot of things about the prequels, although I don't think they're like excellently told stories.
Hold that thought. If you have mean things to say to Joshua about the prequels, now's the time to do it. Please continue.
Don't encourage that behavior. No. I think it's a pretty reasonable approach. Anyways, but now I think I know people, this sequel trilogy is like super divisive with people right now. Again, if I think like 5, 10, 15, however many years go by, people will look back on it with nostalgia and like rose-colored glasses. And so then people will want a return to these characters and see where they're at. I know I just personally want to see Rey using that yellow lightsaber.
You can't show us the yellow lightsaber and then not let us see it in action.
Is it double-ended? I need to know.
I need answers. I need answers to
this. Definitely need to know.
It was a pretty dope lightsaber, I gotta say.
Yeah, I that was one thing that I loved about the Rise of Skywalker is we got 3 new lightsabers. We got Rey's dark saber, we got her cool new saber, and Leia's saber, which is gorgeous. I can't wait to see like all the lightsaber makers on the internet start crafting those. Yes. So we've talked about the past. We've talked about the future a little bit. Now we're going to talk about what I call the sideways. Oh. So not necessarily in a different time on the chronological timeline, right? Happening during things that we're familiar with, just somewhere else.
Interquels, if you will.
Interquels. I like interquels. The Mandalorian, I think, would be a good example of that.
It's an interquel.
Somewhere else in the galaxy. It kind of connects back vaguely, but doing its own thing. What other things could we explore in the Star Wars galaxy that's kind of built that way?
I mean, The Mandalorian is my exact jam. This is exactly what I want to see in Star Wars. I wouldn't mind like a Tales from Jabba's Palace kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like there's
the underworld.
Yeah, the underworld. There's so much that they've set up in the galaxy of Star Wars in terms of sort of the hierarchy and the political system and how people are living outside of that or within that is really fun to explore, I think.
I have a theory, though. I think the Obi-Wan show is actually going to be something like that.
I kind of think it is,
because
too.
look where he is, who runs Tatooine. We're going to run into some huts at some point, and maybe they'll get Diego Luna in there so we can finally touch him.
Yeah.
Off topic. But what do you think, Joshua? What other things should we be exploring? I love your young adult, basically Xavier's School for Gifted Jedi. It was a great idea. What else do you think is in the future?
I do think that you mentioned Ahsoka Tano earlier. She's just obviously such a fan favorite character. Give her a live action standalone series or movie or something. Yeah. There's so much to capitalize on.
Well, they have to set her up in The Mandalorian first.
I want to know what happened to Thrawn and Ezra when they just went with space whales.
They're always going to tell that story.
Deep space.
Who knows what's going to happen there? But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential to do something like that. I think there's a lot of fan favorite characters who never got their moment to shine. Really, like Mace Windu. Give like a limited Mace Windu series.
I have to tell you that just because of the connection of Galaxy's Edge to the sequel trilogy, I was a little tiny bit surprised that Hondo Ohnaka did not show up in Rise of Skywalker. I really kind of thought he would.
They were really pushing him real hard.
Get a reference to Batuu.
So let's talk about Disney Plus. We mentioned it briefly before. Obviously, the fandom, like we talked about, is still split about the current Star Wars movie in theaters, just like the last one. But everyone seems to be united behind this guy and his little buddy. What is so perfect about this show? Why has that show resonated with what seems to be the entire fan base at once?
I think, number one, there is a lot less emotional baggage and expectation tied to it. Certainly, there are a lot of fans of Mandalorians out there. I'm one of them. And I think that
This is the way.
And I think that the people that are fans of Mandalorians were just so excited to actually see that culture portrayed in live action in a way that more people were going to give it a chance. Because up to this point, canonically, everything we know about Mandalorians comes from animated series or a little bit from comic books.
Or Boba Fett.
Who's like not, you guys, Boba Fett is lame. And
my wife got me this shirt, but I was going to wear this shirt because it has the thing. But I really like talking crap about Boba Fett.
Yeah, because it has the Mythosaur skull on it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Continue.
it's okay. No, but that's what I'm saying is that I think that it's so exciting to see the Mandalorians portrayed this way. And it's so interesting too, because people that are already into Mandalorians are now like, whoa, this is very different from what I would have expected to happen given where we ended up in Star Wars Rebels. So there's this level of being so intrigued, and it's really genius on the part of the creators of the show, because you're not alienating people who aren't deep into the animated series.
But instead, rather what it does is it excites those
Yes.
kinds of folks to check out what else is out there
Yes,
and then get into those good
totally.
Mandalorian, Clone Wars, and
Yeah.
Rebels episodes. There's
Yeah.
so much good stuff there. Joshua, what about you, man? Like, what is it about the Mandalorian that just seems to work on every level?
I mean, Baby Yoda, right?
Yeah.
Like, you guys weren't saying
that's
it, but
yeah.
you're like, oh, yeah, it's all this mythology.
it's right
but like,
there.
no, it's Baby Yoda.
It's right there.
But no, I
I
think
mean, it's not wrong. You're right.
it has what everybody likes is, this kind of like badass guy who's like he's very like he's like space Batman, like the episode where he's in the ship.
That's my favorite one, episode 6.
Oh,
You know exactly what I was
second
talking about.
That,
He's like-
that strobe light shot is
Oh, yeah.
straight out of Dark Knight Rises.
It was
it's great.
very John Carpenter also to me, but it was as if the Mandalorian were Michael Myers and you were seeing stuff from his perspective. It was brilliant.
He didn't even kill him like Batman wouldn't. It
But
was
then
great.
he's paired with the cutest thing ever
know!
that captures also all
Yeah.
like the mystique and like magical nature of the Force that we all love so much. Put those things together in this kind of like, space western samurai kind of vibe thing that explores is kind of like off the beaten path of Star Wars.
Sideways.
And
Yeah.
also I think the fact that it's a very small story that doesn't have big epic stakes, that's the fate of the galaxy. I think people needed that after, again, being like enraptured by the sequel trilogy and needing big answers to big questions.
And the Emperor
I think-
rolling out the same plan 4 different times. Continue.
I think people are just happy to have something that's a little more, lighter. I know we all love having big, hearty meals. Sometimes you just need a little salad.
Perfect segue. So, looking forward on Disney Plus, we have the Cassian Andor and K2SO show coming up. Everyone's excited about everyone's favorite bold one himself, the Obi-Wan series that's coming up. And then, of course, we have Mandalorian Season 2. Is the small screen the answer? Is that the way forward for Star Wars? I've heard that bandied about quite a bit, that folks think that the smaller stories seem to work kind of better.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that statement. And once again, with The Mandalorian, as I mentioned earlier, there is a level of when you're making a TV show, the stakes don't have to be as high, both in the story and also in terms of the financial returns. People have already subscribed to Disney Plus. Everybody subscribed to Disney Plus. It's a screaming deal. And there's so much good content on there because you're luring people in with all the nostalgia content, but then you also now have this great platform to make some new interesting stories within a bigger franchise. And so to me, The Mandalorian is so exciting, and it makes me really hopeful for the future of Star Wars television. I'm so much more excited hearing that there's an Obi-Wan series, that the entire thing is being directed by Deborah Chow, who directed my 2 favorite episodes of The Mandalorian, and that it's a show, not just a movie.
Can you even describe for me what the potential that Disney Plus represents to a brand like Star Wars in terms of like the new stories that it can tell through that platform?
I think what Star Wars might do is maybe follow the Marvel track where currently we have just like The Mandalorian, which is kind of its own thing. It's very tangentially related to the Rise of Skywalker if you count Force healing as a connection. And
the Empire.
And then we're getting, yes, and we're getting the Obi-Wan series, which is going to be set, in the past between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. But I think maybe going forward of finding a way to incorporate the shows in the movies more seamlessly, much like how they said the WandaVision show is going to directly lead into the Doctor Strange sequel, and Scarlet Witch is going to be there as a fully fledged sorceress, but that progression that she made will have been on a show. So maybe if we start building out with these the new trilogy of movies that we know are coming out, or we're assuming it's a trilogy because it's 3 movies separated every 2 years.
At least 3 movies.
Anyway, so if they come up with a slate of shows that sort of maybe have a star one of the characters when that character shows up in the movie or does something there that then reflects in the show and really have an unmissable component to the movies on Disney Plus, I think maybe that is the way forward.
That is the way. Yeah, it's almost impossible to not compare Star Wars to the MCU. They're both Disney companies. They're both these huge media juggernauts. But that is something that the MCU is very good at, is the leapfrog, right? This project leads into the next project, leads into the next one. Whereas I feel like Star Wars is very good at connecting those dots really well, but it's the leapfrog that's missing. That's, I think, the thing that Disney Plus can offer.
Yeah, this also brings up a point that I know we're all throwing out all these ideas
Sure.
of all these things
That's
we
what we're
want to
doing
see, but I think, as we saw with Solo, is that people don't want too much Star Wars because it's a very special thing that you have to get like hyped up for. And when they went from The Last Jedi to Solo in just that short span of time, I think a lot of people felt like burnt out a little bit. So I think being very selective in how much Star Wars they give us, like I think it's good that they're taking the break.
A beat, yeah.
Take the break. You know, let Star Wars breathe a little bit, and then when it comes back, like make it really special.
I totally agree with that statement because I find with the MCU stuff sometimes I feel a little superhero burnout, quite honestly. And they're great films. They're all really well connected, and I would love to see something like that happen in Star Wars, as you suggest, Joshua, like bridging the gaps with the Disney Plus series. But dole out your Star Wars sparingly, if you will.
I was at the premiere for The Force Awakens, working at that time. But like, I remember being a part of that, seeing the movie, and then realizing that the event could never be this big and special ever again.
Yeah.
Because it's back, and now it's going to stay back. But of course, we all know Disney Plus, the films, that only scratches the surface as to what Star Wars is as a media franchise. We have video games, we have theme parks now, we're getting a spaceship hotel next year. Like, I still feel like we haven't even hit peak Star Wars yet. Like, we're still on our way up to that. When they figure out the rhythm of the films and get all that all squared away, that's when this is going to really take off. What do you think? Have we hit peak Star Wars?
I don't think we have hit peak Star Wars. I'm in agreement with you. I feel like we are on the upswing on our way into peak Star Wars, that bringing back the sort of main saga with the sequel trilogy was just a catalyst for launching Star Wars into what it's always wanted to be, which I think is really exemplified extremely well in the theme parks of this all-encompassing fictional world that people want to be involved in. And as we continue to open up that world, we just open ourselves up to exploring new stories within there. And that's, I think, how you manage to have lots and lots and lots of Star Wars content without people getting really burned out on the idea of Star Wars.
Joshua.
I actually think we are experiencing peak Star Wars. And I know, again, there's like the fandom seems super divisive, but I had a great time this year.
It was a good year for Star Wars.
We have
really
mentioned Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and that is a canon video game that tells an amazing story. Honestly, one of the best Star Wars experiences I've ever had. Had like everything I've ever wanted from Star Wars in one game, and not just the gameplay, but the story told as well. I thought was just amazing. And we got the theme park like going there. It really did feel like going to visit Star Wars,
right?
Making your own lightsaber and everything. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm very like split on how I feel about the Rise of Skywalker, but I think it's undeniably like a good time, and so
it's a good time to be a Star Wars fan.
I saw it the first time and was like, "What? Rey's Palpatine?"
We have such an embarrassment of riches that we can complain about a Star Wars film.
So,
I remember what it was like when there was no Star Wars films,
and complain about us and not love everything about a Star Wars film, and yet not feel disheartened as a Star Wars fan, because as somebody that looked at Rise of Skywalker, and I've seen it a few times, and my opinions have not really changed. I'm not a big fan of it. There's a lot of stuff I like about it, but overall, I don't like it that much. However, there's so much other Star Wars to like.
But I felt that way about The Last Jedi, and I feel like every time that I watch it since, I like it more and more. So I'm hoping that it ages well.
That's what I was going to say. At first, Rise of Skywalker, I was like, wait, what? And then I saw it again, and just taking it for what it was, I was like, this is a fun ride. Like, I can still have a good time with this, and it introduces a lot of things that I think are, like, really cool and interesting, and then there is a lot to love in a movie that maybe is not overall satisfying. Not that I want to turn this into a review of The Rise of Skywalker, but I also just want to say, and then on top of that, like, we got The Mandalorian, and I just think this was a great year for Star Wars.
I mean, and you can't deny that Rise of Skywalker gave us Babu Frick, so... Where's my Babu Frick Disney Plus Pawn Stars show?
That is where Star Wars should go next. Perfect segue. We need a Babu Frick show immediately. Emma, Joshua, thank you for joining me. Appreciate the comments. This was a great conversation. Folks at home, If you wouldn't mind, let us know what you think. Have we hit peak Star Wars yet? Has that even happened? What does that even look like? Where does Star Wars go next after the Rise of Skywalker? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, now that you're caught up, check out a video that Joshua made about breaking down the lightsaber duel in The Force Awakens, correct?
Yes, the stunt choreographer Rob Inch actually explains how a crossguard lightsaber changes the nature of a whole lightsaber duel, which is really cool.
Very, very cool. Check it out and be sure to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.